I didn't cry. Not when I saw the photo. Not when I realized my own mother had kissed my fiancé. Not even when I zipped up my wedding dress. Alone. The chapel smelled like cedar and baby's breath. The organ hummed low behind the doors. People were laughing, waiting. I was shaking, but not from nerves, just rage. And betrayal so deep I couldn't find the bottom. At 6:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Elise, my maid of honor. She was crying when she sent it. Sure. You need to see this. I'm so sorry. The image loaded slow. Too slow. But I knew. The side of his face. The scarf in her hand. On his back. That kiss. Right there, outside the hotel. The night before the wedding. No disguise. No shame. My mother, Lorraine. In her silk coat. The same coat she wore when she took me home from college the first time. And Chase. The man who held my hand at every chemo appointment. The man who said, "I'll never hurt you." Guess he meant it. Until the night before our vows. I didn't scream. Didn't confront. Didn't cancel. I got dressed. I showed up. I walked toward the altar like every woman before me. But I didn't come to say, "I do." I came to say, "This ends here." So I waited for the music to fade. And when the pastor smiled and said, "Tor, dearly beloved," I raised the mic and said, "Twa. There's something I need to tell y'all." Would you still walk down the aisle? If you found out your mother stole your fiancé? I was 17 when I let go of my future. It came in a phone call. Hospital, stroke, second one this time. My mother couldn't speak. Just blinked into the receiver. And I dropped the Duke acceptance letter into the trash. No one told me to. No one needed to. Dad died when I was 10. Mom and I had survived off casseroles from neighbors and Grace. My sister, Trina, bolted the moment she could. First college, then California. But I stayed. The house in Asheville had creaky floors. The smell of old rugs and lemon pledge never quite gone. I worked nights at the pharmacy, mornings at the school library, afternoons changing linens and adjusting Mom's pills. I remember thinking, Tor, if I give enough, maybe I won't lose anything else. Mom got better. Slowly. Started walking without the cane, making her famous chicken stew. Always too salty, always. Just like your father liked. By the time I turned 30, my world had shrunk to 5 blocks home, work, store, church, and Mom's clinic. Dating, sure. Men who flinched when I said, I live with my mother. Men who forgot my birthday. Men who wanted more than I had left. Then Chase arrived, transferred to the high school as a new guidance counselor. Ex-military. Widower. Soft voice, kind eyes. A gentleness that made you forget the years had teeth. We connected over broken things. He'd lost his wife to breast cancer. Held her hand through the chemo. Buried her in spring. He never talked much about it. But when he did, his voice sounded like gravel under snow. We had coffee after staff meetings. Then walks through the dog park, even though neither of us had dogs. It wasn't electric. It was peaceful, like finding a quiet corner of the world and saying, Tor. This will do. I brought him home after 6 months. Mom had made her sour cherry pie, her special guest recipe. She wore her navy cardigan. Sprayed her rose perfume. Smiled like it was prom night. Tor, you remind me of Harold, she told Chase. My father. I laughed. Chase smiled. Mom held his gaze a little too long. But I brushed it off. She was lonely. This was new for all of us. The engagement came the next spring. Chase took me to the botanical gardens. Same bench where we first talked about our fathers. He didn't kneel. He just said, Tor, I want peace. And you are my peace. I said yes. And when I told Mom, she cried. Not happy tears. Not grief either. Just loud, aching sobs that left snot on my sleeve. She said, You're all I have. Then clutched Chase too long at the dinner table. That night, she texted me, Tor, Let me help plan it. It'll keep me feeling close. So I did. I handed her the folder with the guest list, the florist, the church. Let her make swatches for napkins. Even when she picked ivory instead of white. It's softer, sweetheart. And even when she vetoed Chase's college roommate from the invite list. Chase said, "Chua. She's just trying to feel included." I wanted to believe that. But little things piled. She'd call him to talk about lighting ideas. Then not tell me. One day, I found her scarf in his car, tucked beside the emergency brake. She said she dropped it when he gave her a ride to the podiatrist. Another time, her earrings, small opal studs she wore on anniversaries, ended up in our sofa cushions. Chase laughed. "Truh. Your mom's everywhere these days." And I laughed too. But my stomach tightened, like it knew something my heart refused. One Saturday, I came home early. Mom was in the kitchen. Chase was fixing the screen door. They were whispering. She looked flushed. He looked cornered. When they saw me, they jumped. Mom said, "Tor, we were just arguing about rosemary versus sage." And Chase nodded. I stirred soup that night with shaking hands. But I didn't confront. Didn't accuse. Didn't dare ruin what I thought I'd finally built. Because I had spent my life being the quiet one. The helper. The one who let it slide. And if I broke it now, what would I have left? So I tucked it all beneath my wedding dress. Along with my doubts. And my questions. And all the little pieces of me I had to silence. Just to belong. The night before the wedding, I had a headache. Mom offered me tea. Said Chase had gone out. For a walk. She smiled too much. Wore lipstick to the kitchen. I went to bed early. Didn't ask. Didn't want to know. But at 6:02 a.m., the truth didn't ask if I was ready. It started with the shirt. One of Chase's button-downs, gray plaid, soft cotton, smelled wrong. Not like his usual cedar soap. Something sweeter. Lavender, rose, Mom's perfume. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she'd hugged him. Maybe the scent clung. But the next morning, that same shirt was missing from the laundry. Vanished. Like it had never been worn. Then came the texts. Chase always left his phone face down. But one night, it buzzed twice while he showered. I didn't touch it. Didn't have to. The screen lit up. First tour. Same room as last time. Then, tour. Can't stop thinking about Thursday night. No name. Just a number. Unfamiliar. But with an Asheville area code. I stared. Felt my face go hot. Felt something deep inside me crack. But I didn't ask. Didn't mention it. Instead, I wrote the number down. Searched it later in bed. No matches online. But when I ran it through Chase's old call logs, I found it saved months ago as L.M. Lorraine Mitchell. My mother. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched him. Peacefully turned away, chest rising steady, and I wondered how many lies could fit between two people and still call it love. The next day, I visited Mom. She was pruning the front hedge, humming an old hymn. She looked up and said, "Tra, you look tired, baby." Cold feet. I nodded. Didn't speak. My throat was stone. Then she said, "Tor, marriage is hard. But you've chosen well." And touched my hand. That touch felt like betrayal. Inside, she offered tea. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon toast and warm betrayal. Same table we'd sat at when I told her about my first heartbreak at 22. Back then, she said, "Men stray when they're bored. Stay interesting, Meredith." Now I wondered. Had she meant it as a warning? Or a threat? I checked her laptop while she napped. Felt gross. Wrong. Like a thief in my own childhood home. But in her downloads I found a hotel receipt. Date, last Saturday. Location Hendersonville. Room 214. Guest name, Meredith Vaughn. My name. Chase's card. They booked it under me. I printed it, folded it in half. Put it in my purse like a weapon I didn't know how to use. Still, I said nothing. Why? Because love makes you stupid, loyalty makes you blind, and history makes you quiet. But I started watching. Every look between them. Every small silence in a room. How Mom smoothed her hair when Chase entered. How he stood a little straighter when she laughed. One night, he left to meet a parent. From school. I followed. He drove toward Hendersonville. Same hotel. I didn't go in. I just waited in my car. Counting minutes, breathing through clenched teeth. At 11:17 p.m. I saw him walk out. Alone, no coat, no smile. He looked tired, guilty, empty. The next morning, I found a lipstick-stained coffee cup in his car's cup holder. Not my shade. Mom's, pale coral. Classic Lorraine. I took a photo, saved it to a folder named Truth. Later that week, I logged into Chase's shared Dropbox. Used for wedding planning. Found a document labeled, Gift Ideas L. It wasn't for me. It was a list of perfume brands. Spa packages. Silk robes. L stood for Lorraine. Not Lauren. Not love. Not anything that belonged to me. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just closed the laptop, breathed through the ache, and whispered to myself, Chore, not yet. Not now. But soon. Because I knew. This wasn't a story I could outrun. It was one I had to own. And if silence had protected them, maybe my voice could destroy it. I didn't plan to confront them. I'd rehearsed it in my head a dozen times. Maybe a slap, maybe a scream, maybe something shattering. But when it finally happened, it was quiet. Almost polite. 3 days before the wedding, I stopped by Mom's to drop off a ribbon swatch for the bouquet. She wasn't supposed to be home, neither was Chase. But I walked in, and there they were, in the kitchen, laughing. Chase had a mug in his hand. Her mug. White ceramic with gold cursive, Queen Bee. His hand brushed hers as he passed it back. It wasn't some scandalous embrace. It was worse. Familiar. They froze when they saw me. The laughter dropped like glass. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't blink. Chore. How long? I said. The words came from my chest. Not anger, not even betrayal. Just exhaustion. Neither of them answered. Mom looked at the floor. Chase rubbed the back of his neck, still holding the mug like it might explain something. Chore. How long, Chase? I repeated. His lips parted. No sound came out. He set the mug down, fingers trembling slightly. Chore. It wasn't planned, he said. Chore. We were talking one night after your fittings. She opened up. I didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean. That phrase sat between us like rot. I stared at him. The man who had seen me through every sleepless night. The one who whispered, I'd never leave. Chwa. So it just happened, I said. Chwa. Like rain. Like spilled wine. He didn't answer. Just looked away. Then Mom stepped forward. She didn't look ashamed. She looked tired. Defensive. Chwa. You were always gone, Meredith, she said. Chwa. Ate work. Church. The school. You poured into everyone but us. I felt something behind my ribs twist. Chwa. I lived here for 22 years. I said. Chwa. I gave up a full ride at Duke. I took night shifts. I bathed you. I fed you. I gave Chase every decent piece of myself. She didn't blink. Chwa. And I gave you my life. She snapped. Chwa. And for once, someone gave something back. She meant Chase. She meant him. That was when I realized. She didn't see what she had done as betrayal. She saw it as balance. I left without another word. No door slam. No sobs. Just the sound of my heels against the old hardwood floor, clicking like war drums on retreat. I sat in the car for 47 minutes. Didn't start it. Didn't move. I just stared at my hands on the wheel. Skin pale, cuticles bitten raw. Hands that had written every check, carried every burden, held everything together. Now they couldn't even hold me up. That night, I went home and opened a box from the closet. Old photos. Memories I hadn't touched in years. There was one of me at 5, in overalls, holding a balloon shaped like a dinosaur. Another from the county fair, Dad holding me on his shoulders, his eyes creased from smiling. Then, 4th grade. School portrait. I had a crooked smile and missing front teeth. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, it said, "Chor, the girl who ruined everything." I had found it once in high school. She said she didn't mean it. Said it was a joke. It never felt like one. I remembered that year. She missed my recital. Said she had a migraine. I played alone. The piano teacher patted my back. But I still cried under the bleachers. I was 9. That's when I stopped asking her to come to things. She always found a reason not to. When I got my first period, she handed me a box of pads with the receipt still inside. Said, "Chua, don't make a mess." Then walked away. No talk, no warmth, just more silence. I became the silence, the good daughter, the obedient one, even when I burned. And now, again, I was told that I'd given too much, that my absence had invited this. But I'd been present for everything. Every doctor visit, every leak in the roof, every bill, every ache that wasn't mine but became mine because that's what love meant. Or so I thought. That night, I poured a glass of wine. Didn't sip it. Just held it. Like an anchor in my palm. I looked around the apartment. Everything in its place. Candles I'd picked for the wedding scent. Bridesmaid gift bags wrapped on the counter. A framed picture of me and Chase from our first hike. The one where he said, "Twir, you make everything still." I wanted to smash it. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because I wasn't angry. I was emptied. Later that night, I opened my laptop. Started a new document. Title, Is PROOF. I uploaded the photo of the mug, the hotel receipt, screenshots of the texts, Mom's scarf in Chase's trunk, time stamped, the lipstick print on his coffee sleeve, the email he sent. Intimate, clumsy, signed with an M and a heart. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. But compiling it felt like air returning to my lungs. I needed truth. Even if no one else did. 3 days later, Chase knocked on my door. He looked thinner, hair messy, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in a week. He held a single rose, wilted at the edges. "Tor, can we talk?" I leaned against the frame. Didn't invite him in. "Tor, I miss you," he said. "Tor, I made a mistake." His voice cracked. I stayed silent. "Tor, I don't even know what happened," he continued. "Tor, your mom was there. She understood things." I felt needed. I tilted my head. "Tor, did you love her?" I asked. He looked down, paused too long. "Chua, I don't know." "Chua, did you love me?" That one hit harder. He opened his mouth, then shut it. I nodded. No tears, no dramatic exit. Just the quiet thud of the door closing. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. Because silence, for the first time in my life, was mine. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't fear. It wasn't surrender. It was the sound of a woman who had drawn her line and would never cross it again. I hadn't seen Aunt Diane in over 6 years. She lived in a smaller town just outside Asheville, near the river. A place where the trees didn't try to impress anyone. I didn't call first. Just drove. The way you drive when something old in you needs tending. Not fixed, just seen. She opened the door like she'd been waiting. "Tor, you're here?" she said. No question, just fact. The living room still smelled like cedar and oatmeal cookies. Same quilt on the couch. Same little photo of me at 10 in the corner, laughing with a juice box in hand. She poured coffee. Didn't ask why I came. Just waited. After a few sips, I said it. "Toi." She slept with my fiancé. Diane didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. Just nodded once, like a page turning. "Tor?" "She would," she said. I stared at her. "Tor, that's it." She set her mug down gently, folded her hands. Tor, Meredith, your mother was a storm long before you were born. Silence. Then Diane exhaled, slow. Tor, you know about the affair, don't you? Cho, you mean this one? Cho. No, she said softly. Tor, I mean your father. Tor Harold. My breath caught. Tor, he cheated. Diane nodded. Tor, when Lorraine was pregnant with you. With the housekeeper? Young. 22. Blonde. You were 4 months along. The room stilled. My heart beat loud in my ears. Like it wanted out. Tor, why didn't anyone tell me? Tor, because Lorraine made sure no one ever did. She leaned forward. Tor, she didn't scream. She didn't leave. Tor, she stayed. Tor, but something in her changed after that. I stared at my coffee. It had gone cold.
Tor, she became hard?
Diane said. Tor, calculated, she said. If men get to take what they want, I'll learn to take it back. I remembered her voice in my head. The constant rules, the need for perfection. Tor, she never let herself be vulnerable again. I whispered. Diane nodded. Tor, and she never let anyone close enough to betray her again. Char, except you. That part hit. Right there, in the ribs. Tor, she never wanted a daughter, Diane added. Tor, she wanted a second chance. Tor, a redo. Tor, a mirror she could control. I sat back. The air felt too thick to breathe. Tor, so I was what? Tor, her way of making the world pay? Tor, no. Diane said gently. Tor, you were her lifeline. Tor, she just didn't know how to love you without strings. A pause. Then, Tor, I left when she started using your name to make people feel sorry for her. Tor said raising you alone made her unlovable. Tor, I couldn't watch her turn motherhood into a weapon. Oh, tears welled, but I didn't let them fall.
Tor,
Why didn't you reach out to me? I asked. Tor, because I thought you were still hers. Tor, now I see you're not. She reached over. Touched my hand. Not to guide, just to hold. Tor, you deserved better, she said. I nodded. Tor, I'm not calling off the wedding, I said quietly. Diane looked at me. Tor, you're marrying him. I shook my head. Tor, no. Tor, but I'm walking down that aisle. Tor, I'm not running away. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Tor, then make sure it's your altar, not theirs. I left with nothing in my hands. No folder. No proof. Just the weight of a truth I hadn't known I needed. Lorraine wasn't just broken. She'd built herself from the rubble. But I didn't have to. Her story could end with her. Mine could begin here. I went home, opened the closet, took out the dress, ran my hands down the lace. Not with joy. Not with pain. With clarity. This wasn't the dress I'd wear to marry. This was the dress I'd wear to bury a legacy, and I'd do it in front of everyone. With steady hands. With a clear voice. And with no regrets. I didn't cancel the wedding. That was the first decision I made for myself. People expected a runaway bride, a breakdown, a quiet note left on the kitchen table. But I didn't run. I stayed. And I began to build. Quietly. Carefully. Not revenge. Not spectacle. Just the truth. Prepared like a gift I had every right to unwrap. The first step was Elise. She'd been my friend since sophomore year. Back when my biggest betrayal was a missed sleepover. She knew something had happened. But she hadn't pressed. When I walked into her apartment, she opened the door with eyes wide. Tor, tell me everything? She said. Tor, or tell me nothing. Just point and I'll follow. I told her everything. The mug, the messages, the scarf, the cold. She didn't cry. Didn't gasp. She just nodded like she'd already suspected. Tor, what do you want to do? Tor, I want to finish what they started, I said. Elise pulled out her camera, the one she used for school projects and side weddings. Tor, how public? Tor, as public as the lie, I said. We made a plan. She'd arrive as my guest. Sit near the aisle. Start recording the moment I walked in. Her camera wouldn't be obvious. No lights, no mechs, just truth, quiet, steady, unblinking. That night I made a Google Drive folder. Title OS, Wedding Archive, thus I uploaded every file. Organized the receipts, the text, the photo evidence. Labeled each with timestamps. At the bottom, I wrote tour. This is not for destruction. Tour, it's for clarity. Tour for air. Tour for the girl who stayed silent too long. The next day, I went to the florist. Confirmed the bouquet. Asked them to tuck in one items a folded copy of the receipt. The one for room 214, under my name. It would sit beneath the calla lilies, pressed between petals and truth. I tried on the dress again. The seamstress smiled. You look radiant. I looked at myself in the mirror, hair pinned back, eyes rimmed red, hands still. Chore, thank you, I whispered, but in my head, I thought, no, I don't look radiant. I look like a woman about to walk through fire, and this time I won't burn. I visited the church next. Confirmed the seating, walked the aisle while no one watched. The organist rehearsed in the loft above. Notes drifting down like smoke. Each step echoed. Wood under heels, the scent of wax polish and old hymns. I stopped at the altar. Imagined Chase standing there. Imagined Lorraine in her navy silk, smiling like the mother of the bride. They wouldn't expect silence to carry weight. They never had. That night, I wrote a short speech, not a full expose. Just enough. I'd read a line from the journal, hold up a photo, say one sentence. Then I'd leave, not run, not flee. Leave, with spine intact, with truth in hand. Elise came over the night before. She brought wine. We didn't drink it. We sat on the floor, sorting through envelopes. Are you scared? She asked.
Terrified.
Want me to stop you? No. She pressed a hand over mine. Then let's end this story the way you need to. I nodded. She left at 11:17 p.m. I didn't sleep. I ironed my dress, pressed the ribbon, laid out the shoes. At 2:41 a.m. I wrote a letter. Addressed to no one. Maybe to myself. If you're reading this, it means I chose me. For the first time. Not out of anger. Not for revenge. Just to say. I'm not a mirror for other people's pain. I'm not your apology. I'm not your substitute. I'm not your silence. I'm Meredith. And I am done carrying shame that doesn't belong to me. I folded it. Slid it into my shoe. Taped it to the insole. A reminder. When I woke, the sky was gray, not ominous, just soft, like it knew not to compete. Mom texted at 6:45 a.m. We're so excited. Don't be late. I didn't reply. Elise picked me up at 8. Her car smelled like peppermint gum and dry nerves. She looked at me. You're sure? I've never been more sure. We parked in the back. I waited until guests were seated. The music began. I held the bouquet. Felt the folded paper inside. Felt it press into my palm. One breath. Another. Then I stepped forward. Not toward a man. Not toward a marriage. Toward truth. And they had no idea what was coming. The chapel smelled like vanilla wax and pressed linen, cinnamon from the candles. Old wood warmed by sun. Every pew was filled. People shifted. Rustled. Soft organ notes echoed overhead. I stood behind the double doors, my hand resting on the cold metal handle. My breath steady, but my chest ached. A dull, familiar heaviness. The dress felt heavier than yesterday. The lace tighter, like it knew. I looked down at the bouquet. Calla lilies. Pearl ribbon. And hidden inside, folded 3 times. The hotel receipt from room 214. The final piece of proof. Elise stood to the side, seated near the aisle. Her camera was tucked into her purse, angled just right. She didn't blink. The coordinator whispered, You ready, hon? I nodded once, didn't speak. The doors opened. Gasps. I heard them. I felt them. Not admiration, not joy, something quieter. Unspoken tension, like the room already sensed something was wrong, but didn't know where to look. I stepped forward. One breath. Then another. Left foot. Right. Each step echoing softly against the polished floor. People smiled. Phones rose. But no one clapped. No one dared. I wasn't glowing. I was carrying something. And they saw it, even if they didn't know what it was yet. Lorraine sat in the front row, drenched in navy silk. Her hair curled, her lipstick fresh. She looked radiant. Like a woman who believed her performance had worked. She smiled at me. I didn't return it. Chase stood waiting. Tie perfectly centered. Posture tall, but his eyes, they darted. Like a man preparing for impact, but unsure from which direction it would come. He mouthed, "You look beautiful." I didn't reply. I simply arrived. At the altar. At the place where stories are supposed to begin. The pastor smiled. Opened his binder. Tor, dearly beloved. I raised my hand. Just one. Small. Decisive. The pastor hesitated. Brows lifted.
Toi? Yes.
Tor. Before we continue, I said, Tor, I have a few words. A ripple moved through the pews. I turned to face the room. Not just the crowd, but the witnesses, old friends. My boss. The couple who lived next door to me for 10 years. People who had seen my life in fragments. Today they would see it whole. I took a slow breath. The kind you take when something is about to change. Tor, before I say any vows. Tor. Before anyone here blesses this moment. Tor. I think it's only fair you know what's already been said. Behind closed doors. I reached into the bouquet. Fingers brushed against the folded paper. The receipt.
No, not yet.
I pulled the other, a page from Lorraine's journal. Unfolded it slowly, hands still, voice level. October 14th, I began. He said he never loved her, only what she represented. And that with me, he could be fully seen. I told him, then don't marry her just to keep the story clean. True. And he said, it's too late, but we'll keep our story anyway. The chapel went silent. Someone gasped. A program fluttered to the ground. The organist stopped playing. This was written, I continued, by my mother. Lorraine Mitchell. She's here today. In the front row. The woman who planned this ceremony. Who picked this very dress. Who smiled at me just moments ago. As if nothing had happened. I turned to her. Lorraine's smile was gone. Her lips tight, hands locked together like they might break apart otherwise. And Chase. I said, He told her I was safe. Predictable. Convenient. That marrying me would help rebuild his reputation. But loving her made him feel alive. Chase flinched. I saw it. I wanted to feel something. Pity, fury, anything. But I felt empty, not numb, not cold, just free. He said he wouldn't hurt me. I whispered. But he never said he'd protect me. I reached into the bouquet again. This time, I pulled the photo. Elise had cued it in the projector, just in case. I gave her a small nod. She clicked. And there, on the screen meant to display baby photos, engagement moments, laughing memories, a still frame, grainy, but clear. Chase and Lorraine. Outside the hotel. Mid-kiss, mid-lie, gas again. Someone said, oh my God. Another whispered, that's her? Lorraine stood. Meredith. This isn't the time. I turned. You had time? I said. You used it. Now it's my turn. She sat back. Slow. Like her legs had forgotten how to hold her. Chase opened his mouth. I can explain. No, I cut in. You explained plenty. To her. In hotel rooms. In text messages. In every look you gave her when you thought I wasn't watching. I turned to the pastor. There will be no vows today. Not because I was left. But because I choose to leave. The stillness was full. Not awkward. Sacred. Then I turned back to the guests. To those wondering why I did this here. Why I didn't just disappear quietly. It's simple. Tor the betrayal was public. Tor the performance was public. Tor and so is the truth. I stepped down from the altar. My shoes soft on the red carpet. Petals scattered. People stunned. Elise met me halfway. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. She simply placed the camera back in its bag, put her arm through mine, and walked with me. Lorraine didn't move. Chase whispered my name. But I kept going. Out the side door. Into the air. It was warmer than expected. Quiet. The kind of quiet you only feel after finally hearing your own voice. And believing it. The video went online 2 days later. Elise sent it to me first. No cuts, no edits. Just truth, clean and steady. I watched it alone, on my laptop. Wrapped in a sweatshirt I hadn't worn since college. The kind with a hole in the sleeve and a stain from a coffee spill in 2007. I watched myself walk down that aisle again. Not as a bride, but as something else. A woman walking toward the end of something, and the start of something better. Elise asked me, "You sure?" I didn't hesitate. Twice, she posted it at 8:43 a.m. By noon it had 200,000 views. By 6:00 p.m., a local news blog picked it up. Small, town bride exposes fiancé and mother in viral wedding video. I turned off my phone, closed my laptop, lit a candle. Lavender. The scent my mother used to wear. Then I opened a window and let it drift out. I didn't read the comments. Not right away. But Elise did. She texted me Tor. Hundreds of women. Tor stories like yours. Tor all saying thank you. One wrote, "I stayed silent for too long. Tor, you reminded me I didn't have to." Another Tor, "My mother stole my voice. Tor, yours gave it back." It wasn't victory. Not the kind you cheer for. It was something quieter. Like breath after drowning. Lorraine called once. Voicemail. "Tor, you humiliated me. Tor, do you have any idea what people are saying?" I deleted it. Chase didn't call. But his sister did. Left a message saying, "Tor, he's not working right now. Tor, he's not well." I listened to that one twice. Not out of guilt. Just to be sure I felt nothing. And I didn't. Not hate, not pity, just space. Room. I went back to the apartment the next morning, not to move out, just to be there. To take it back. It still smelled like the bouquet. Lilies and nerves. I opened every window. Let the November air move through like water. Unpacking the silence, unfolding the days. I packed away the dress. Not in anger. Just folded. Placed it in the back of the closet, underneath boxes of childhood books and fall coats. I planted a new orchid on the windowsill. The old one had died sometime in October. I hadn't noticed. The new one had white petals with purple edges. A little dramatic. A little soft. Like me, maybe. I started going for walks again. Same path I used to take after work. Down by the library. Past the bakery. To the bench with the chipped armrest. I sat there one afternoon, felt the breeze. Listened to someone's child laugh as they passed. A woman walked by. Mid-50s. Brown coat. Scarf loose at the collar. She slowed, paused. "Tor. Are you the woman from the video?" I nodded. "Tor. My sister sent it to me," she said. "Tor," she cried. Tor then called our mom. Tor told her everything she'd been hiding for years. She reached into her purse. Pulled out a small card. "Tor. I teach women's writing workshops in Charleston. Tor, if you ever want to come speak, just read something. Tor, we'd love to have you." I took the card. Held it in my hand. Felt its weight. "Tor, thank you," I said. Not for the invite. For seeing me. For not looking away. That night, I made tea. Chai. Sat on the floor. Laptop open. Typed something. Not a journal. Not a script. Just a letter. Tor. To the ones who stayed silent. Tor, I know what that silence tastes like. Tor, like metal. Tor, like glass you keep in your throat, because you don't know where else to put it. Tor, I carried it for years. Tor, and when I let it go. Tor, I found my voice wasn't ruined. Tor, it was just waiting. I hit save. Didn't post it. Not everything had to be shared. Justice wasn't always public. Sometimes it was lighting a candle. Sometimes it was returning the spare key you never should have held. Sometimes it was deleting the voicemail and not needing to tell anyone you did. I didn't want to destroy them. Lorraine. Chase. I just wanted to not be destroyed by them. And that, I realized, was enough. One morning, I walked out to the mailbox. Cold air. Damp leaves on the steps. Inside was a padded envelope. No name. Just a return address from Michigan. Inside, a letter. Typed. Sure. Meredith. Sure, I don't know you. Sure, but I know your story. Sure, I've lived parts of it. Sure, thank you for doing what I couldn't. Sure, for not letting them speak over you again. Sure, I watched your video 3 times. Sure, the 3rd time, I didn't cry. Sure, I stood up. Sure, and I left. No signature, just that. I folded it, placed it in a drawer, right next to the photo of me at 16, laughing with a graduation cap half on. I don't know what justice looks like for everyone. But for me, it looks like this: breathing deeply, cooking dinner without a knot in my stomach, sitting by the window without needing to check my phone, not explaining, not apologizing, just being. And for the first time in years, that was more than enough. 1 year later, I stopped counting days since the wedding. I stopped counting views. Stopped checking if people were still watching the video. Stopped wondering what Lorraine or Chase were telling themselves at night. Some wounds don't scar. They close soft, invisible, until you brush against something and realize you're stronger now. The orchid bloomed again that spring. Not by chance. I repotted it with care. Fed the roots. Moved it to the right window. White petals. Purple tips. Same as before. But it looked more certain this time. Like it knew it belonged. Just like I do now. Lorraine moved away sometime in February. She sold the house I grew up in. The one where silence clung to walls and apologies never made it past the doorway. The new owners painted the porch light blue. They planted petunias out front. I drove by once. Just once. Didn't stop. Didn't feel anything. Not even nostalgia. That was its own kind of freedom. I stayed in Asheville. In the same apartment. With the same windows that creaked in winter. The same kitchen where I once sat and decided not to disappear. I planted new herbs on the balcony. Mint. Rosemary. Basil. Things that come back if you care for them. In July, Elise and I launched our writing circle. Just 7 chairs. 1 candle. 2 pots of tea. We called it Cess Letters We Never Sent. The idea was simple: you write the things you couldn't say. To the people who left. The ones who stayed too long. The versions of yourself that didn't know better. Sometimes the women read aloud. Sometimes they folded their papers and burned them in a bowl. Once, someone ripped hers into tiny squares, then held the pieces like snow before letting them fall. We never clapped. We never fixed. We just listened. Witnessed. Let things land. One evening, a girl came with her aunt. 9, maybe 10. Eyes like bottled questions. She didn't speak for most of it, but when her aunt stepped out to take a call, the girl walked up to me, held a small, folded paper in both hands. Tor, is this for the box? We kept a wooden box near the door. No label, no lock. Just a place to leave what you couldn't carry yet. She dropped her note in. Looked up at me. Tor, are you still married? I smiled. Gentle. Tor, I never was. But I'm home now. She nodded like she understood. Or wanted to. That night, after everyone left, I opened the windows. The breeze came in soft. Not cold, not warm. Just real. I sat by the orchid. Wrote in a small green notebook. Tor. I didn't walk away to hurt them. I walked away to find the part of me they never saw. I walked away so I could stop waiting to be chosen. The next morning, I taught my first full class again. Teenagers. Messy, brilliant, curious. One of them asked what I did over the summer. I smiled. Tur. I remembered who I was. Tor and I wrote some things I'd forgotten how to say. They didn't ask more. Just nodded, opened their notebooks, started scribbling. After class, a colleague stopped me. Tor, you look lighter. I paused, tucked my keys into my coat. Toi? I stopped trying to carry what never belonged to me. They didn't know what that meant. And I didn't explain. Some truths aren't for everyone. Just the ones ready to hear them. Weeks passed. Then months. One afternoon, I went to the bakery I used to love. The owner recognized me. Tur, you're that woman, she said. Tur, from the wedding. I nodded. Tur, that was a year ago. Tur, still feels brave, she said. Tur, it felt necessary. I bought a muffin, sat by the window, watched the world move like it always had. Only now, I wasn't watching from behind glass. I was part of it. I was no longer paused. Back home, I opened the closet, took out the box. The dress, still folded, still white, still heavy. I didn't try it on. I didn't touch it long. I whispered, Tor, you weren't wasted. Tor, you were witness. Then I closed the box, put it back. That night, I opened my laptop, saw an inbox full of unread messages. Some strangers, some women I'd never met, stories, pains, words they'd never spoken aloud, until they saw someone else do it first. One wrote, Tra, you walked out so I could walk in. To myself. Another said, Tra, you didn't ruin anything. Tor, you gave voice to what I buried years ago. I didn't reply to all. Didn't try to. But I read every line. Some twice. Some with tears. Some with stillness. And one with the deepest breath I've taken in years. Then I turned off the light. And let the quiet settle. But this time, it wasn't emptiness. It was space. Space for what's next. And if you're reading this now, if you've ever lived through betrayal, quiet or loud, family or partner, sister or stranger, you are not alone. If someone told you to stay small, to keep the story clean, to protect their version of love, you're not wrong for walking away. And you don't owe anyone your silence. Ever. So I ask you, Asio, have you lived through a betrayal like mine? Did you stay quiet? Or did you find your voice? Tell me below. Not for me, but for the woman still sitting in her car outside the wedding she never wanted. She's listening. We all are.